7:54 p.m. Today is May 16, 2022. Which was from the XD. Walang electric pan ay ceiling fan.
Year 2010 or 2009, when I was in college, guys, pag wala kasing gets before or wala siya nakakuan, wala siya nimo siya gibutang sa imuhang main function or at the end of the line, dili mo siya longer makita ang output. So kaya ginagamit din namo siya before kasi I actually experienced before na during the laboratory exam kasi yun kaya hindi ko makalimutan na yun ang reason why natagalan ako matapos sa exam and hindi ko na naayos yung exam ko kasi kulang lang pala ako ng get. Kasi pag walang get kasi hindi siya mag-blink lang sa imong output. Hindi mo siya makita longer ang imong output po. So ganun ako katanga before. Kaya always ko siya. So kahit ngayon, 'di ba, sa ngayon po pwede na kasi ngayon na walang gets. Kasi before hindi pwede na walang gets. Pag walang gets kasi before again, hindi siya longer makita yung output. Kasi if di kayo magamit ng gets, you can use later in zero po. Okay? So let's proceed again to sum up. System-defined functions, ito yung functions na ready to use na siya. Okay? That's the one. Or the other term again, ang always na ko gina-remind sa akong sarili pag maingon kag system-defined functions, these functions are built-in. Kumbaga built-in na siya. Okay? The other term again is ready to use. All the programmer, ang kailangan lang dyan sa programmer, which is kamo, need lang ninyo i-include ang appropriate header file kasi mga na-mention ako a while ago associated with that function. So, for example, get, again, don't forget na pag magamit ka get na functions, you need to have con.io sa header file. Pag magamit ka printf or scanf na functions, you need to include the header file stdio. Okay? So this time I'm going to proceed with the second types of functions, which is the programmer-defined function. So when you talk about programmer-defined functions, this is the opposite of the system-defined function. Kasi system-defined functions, built-in na siya, ready to use na. So ang kailangan lang sa programmer, kuha lang siya, i-include lang nimo ang header file if you're going to use that specific function. Dito po sa programmer-defined functions, these are functions that are created by the programmer. Hindi pa ito na-create, guys. Always remember that one. Okay? Kayo pa po ang mag-formulate, kayo pa ang, kumbaga kung kayo po ang scientist, kayo po ang mag-name ng function, kayo po ang mag-instruct or kayo po ang kanang construct kung ano ba yung purpose, ano ba yung gagawin ng inyong function. So kaya again, from the word itself, programmer-defined function. The programmer will define that specific function, or we're going to define or to name that functions po. Okay? Now, the second definition of this programmer-defined functions, this certain problems again cannot be solved with system-defined functions alone. Again, yung system-defined functions na dimension anis katong dimension kani siya. Okay, na yung mga functions na dili jud siya ma-solve kasi dili na siya natansya or may mga certain problems or kanang kuampo na ay gusto si programmer kung asa yung kuampo. Paano ba yung magiging flow? Ano ba yung magiging gamit or sa batong gusto i-solve the programmer. So that's the use of function. Okay? I mean, the programmer-defined function. Again, with the programmer-defined functions, programmer needs to create their own functions to solve problems the way they want them to be solved. The programmer becomes a creator, yun nga ang na-mention ko kanina, siya ang magiging siya ang magiging going to mag-instruct siya, and has the full control over the things happening in the program. Kayo po yun yung programmer, ha? Baka magtaka po kayo o baka sabihin niyo, si Sir Bolo po yung programmer defined function. No, tayo po, the one who going to encode or the syntax po, di ba? As programmer tayo, di ba? From the very beginning pa po, kung kayo po ay naka-enroll ng Computer Programming 1, ng CC102, ng CC103, kayo po ay considered na as programmer. Okay? Now, how to create functions? So again, sum up lang na ito para at least klaro. So again, we have two types of functions, namely system-defined functions and programmer-defined functions. So pag sinabi natin system-defined functions, these are functions that are built-in, ready to use, and ang inyo lang yung buhaton, imo lang siyang itawagon lang ninyo or include lang ninyo si header file. Okay? Now, the second type of functions is what you call programmer-defined functions. Ito yung mga functions na buhaton ni programmer. Okay? Okay. Now, let's proceed now with the the programmer-defined functions, kung paano ba mag-create ng functions. Am I audible? Audio check, please.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Kasi wala na maningog eh. Well, anyway, so let's proceed. How to create a function. So, before we can start creating a functions, ito po yung tatandaan natin. We need to know first this important concept. Ito siya, yung tatlo. First, the function prototype. Second is the definition. And third, the function call. Again, function prototype, function definition, and function call. So, yun po ang tatandaan natin. So, let's start with the first one. So, ito po yung function prototype. Pag sinabi natin function prototype, before ka mag-create sa imuhang kuan, creating something, or before you're going to create something sa imuhang source code, or before sa imong function, you need to create a plan. Or, simple as blueprint. Kana bitong sa engineer, di ba? Kung magbuhat og balay, kailangan nimo mag-blueprint. Kung asa ba imong poste, asa ba dira ang pila ba na siya ka floor, asa ba diha ang main door, asa ba diha naka-point imong ang kuan, or etc. Okay? In functions, guys, a function prototype is needed before the functions can be formally created. Okay? A function prototype tells the compiler these four important things. First, the return type, the type of data returned by a function. Eto siya. I know daghan na kayo ang mga familiar na diri, no? So you're going to refresh yourself first. Eto first, again, the type of data returned by a function. Kumbaga, imong pangutan-on dira unsa bay i-return sa ako ang function, diba? Integer ba ang return type, returned na value, or imong function ba dili mag-return og value? Dalawa lang kasi yan. Second, the number of parameters the functions expect to receive. Okay? Pila ba ka parameter akong dawaton? Isa, duha, tulo, or upat, or more. Third, the type of, or the types of parameter. Kumbaga, you alam mo na you have 3 parameters. Ano ba yung mga data type ng parameters na imong dawaton? Integer, float, character, or integer siya tanan? Pwede kasi yan na iba-iba. Fourth, the order in which these parameters are expected. Yun nga na-mention ko kanina. Sa parameter po, you can have mixed data types po sa or type po sa imong parameter. You can have integer, float, integer, or you can have whole po sila na parameter po na integer po yung kanyang data type. You can have that one. But as programmer, you must have presence of mind and always jud ka dapat nakatutok sa imong source code. Hindi pwede na tanga, hindi pwede na kanang pakuan ka kanang palipat-lipat or pa bago-bago na isip. Again, ito po ha, always remember the 4 reason or 4 requirements po in building your function prototype. First, the type of data returned by a function. Second, the numbers of parameters. Third, the type of parameters. And last, the order in which these parameters are expected. Now, eto po sa, inside pa din po tayo kay parang function prototype ha. Do you still remember the int main function? Na-remember pa
Yes, sir.
main function? Okay. Kasi kaya si int main function guys or si main function pwede kasi yan na walang int lang or you can change that one void. Okay? But pag sinabi natin int, its prototype would have been in main. Ito po yung prototype niya. Ito yung hindi natin nakikita, 'di ba? But kasi isa lang naman yung functions natin. It is the main function. But of course, this is not necessary for main anymore. Dili na siya kailangan prototype yung prototype siya pag na-assign si Michael ha. Pero pag nasa ang inyong functions nasa po ibabaw before the main function, pwede na po kayong walang prototype. Pero dili naman dili naman na beginners kasi we are considered as advanced na, especially nandito na tayo sa intermediate programming. Pero during your, as can remember, during your fundamentals of programming or computer programming 1, gina-required pa dyan sa mo mag-build o prototype katulad sa pinakataas. Later po, I'm going to give or include this prototype kasi pag ang inyong functions po nakalagay sa pinakataas, pwede na po kayo before the main function po sa baba, pwede na po kayo ng walang prototype. Pero pag inyong functions nakalagay after po sa inyong main functions, you need to include or to insert or to put the prototype before the main function po. Later po, I'm going to give stress out ako sa later during the demo. But for other functions, it is actually required. Okay? Yun nga ang na-mention ko. So, ito yung sample ng prototype. The return type, function name, and the parameter list. Parameter list, you can have as many parameter as you want. As programmer, tayo naman yung may alam kung ilang parameter. Ano yung data type ng ating mga parameter. Okay? Sa return type, so ito siyang isa-isahan ha. So, ito yung sa prototype guide. Return type, function name, and parameter list. Let's start with the return type. Sa return type, it refers to the data type of the value to be returned by the function. So always remember, you can have int, char, float, and double. Okay? The same goes with the main function po. Meron siyang return type na int. Okay? Now, if your function does not return a value, so, eto na yung gamit ng void. Actually, before pa, since ngayon lang tayo nag-discuss ng functions, si void po, pwede nyo nang gamitin. Pero void, again, is not data type. Return type po si void. Okay? Baka magtaka kayo. Baka gamitin nyo po si void sa loob ng main function. Kasi again, I would just like to stress it out, that void po is not a data type. It is a return type. Kaya void po, sa functions lang po yan sa visible. So again, balik ko na nako. So may dalawa tayong return type guys. Imuha siyang pangutanon kung ang imuhang functions ba mag-return of value. So kung mag-return siya value, ito lang po yung mga choices niyo po. Int, char, float, double, ano pa ba yung mga data type po? So, pwede yan siya gamitin. Pero, pag ang inyong function does not return a value, again, the keyword is does not return a value, that's the time you're going to use the void return type po. Okay? Sa function name, any name will do po. Just like how you name variables or an identifiers. Recommended, use names that describes its purpose. So, for example, ang imong ang imong functions kay mag-calculate sa duha ka value. So, you can have add two numbers. Okay? Parameters. So, sa parameters, now what is parameters, guys? A parameter, again, is a dummy variable. Hindi itong kanang sinis. So, it is a dummy variable that is used as a container lang po for a value that will be passed during the function call. Kumbaga, tudlanan lang na siya, container. Okay? Dummy lang na siya. Now, how comes int main has no parameter? Paano ba nangyari yon na walang parameter po si int main? Okay. Now, obviously kasi int main talaga is mo na dyan sa iyong format, requirements na niya, and then you are only required to use parameters when you intend your functions to receive a value from the other function or from the function call po. Pero since again, wala naman nakalagay doon sa wala man tayong function call kasi nga isa sa mga functions na required natin is si int main. Format na talaga yan sa ng C, C++. So, wala tayong magawa doon kasi part na yan sa. Pero wala siyang gina-expect na value po i-pass diha sa parameter kaya wala siyang mga container na nakalagay. Okay? Examples of function prototype without parameters. So you can have a function that will add two integers but does not return a value. So you can have void, kasi nga does not return a value ha. So void add to int. So again, this is an example. This function name is an example of camel case. Pag sinabi natin camel case, ang first word po small letter pa na siya ang first letter, but the second word, ang first letter, naka-capital letter po para at least mabasa
natin sa 200.
siya. So that is an example of a camel case na function name or variable name. The second parameter, so a function does not, a function that will add two integers and returns the result to the calling entity. So int add to int parenthesis po ang semicolon. So again, the difference between the two, etong sa taas, does not, again, the keyword, does not return a value. Okay? Ang ito sa baba, mag-return sa result. So kaya, from the way sa returns the result, mag-return sa value. So again ha, yung keyword, returns the result, returns the value. Ang dito po sa taas, does not return a value, any value. So, eto po, kanina po, ang ginawa natin na example, walang parameter. Dito po sa second example, these are function prototypes na may parameter siya. Maria Cristina Gambong.
Basta si Agilo na, sir.
Ay, okay. Kinsa ni si Maria Cristina Gambong? Good evening.
Good evening, sir, na wala na change ang...
Ay, okay. Miss Aguilon?
Aguilon po.
Okay po. Thank you. Good evening. So, again, nandito na po tayo sa function prototypes. So, ito po siya ng example is meron na siyang parameter. So, as you can observe, we're going to check. Wala siya'y parameter diri ha. So, inside the parenthesis, wala siya'y laman. That's the parameter. Kasi yung nasa loob ng parenthesis, that is what we call parameter po. So, dito po, it is an example na meron siyang parameter po. So, may dalawa siyang parameter. So, this is an example of function that receives two integers, compute the sum, but, again, does not return a value. So, pag sinabi natin but does not return a value, that's the time we're going to use void na return type. So, ito yung function that receives two integers. So, nakalagay dyan, dalawang integer. Sir, bakit A? Again, yung A and B, so initiative na yan ninyo ha as programmer to name a variable. So, you can have X and Y or A1 or A2. So, you can have any of the variable names, but the same lang po siya na integer po ng data type kasi nga na-mention sa dito. Ito po yung sample ng name ng kanyang function, add to int. So, sa name ng function, baka magtanong kayo, sir, pwede ba kami mag-name ng aming function? Yes, you can have your own. This is just a sample. Okay, this is another sample of a function that receives two integers, compute the sum, and returns a value. So, pag sinabi natin returns a value, hindi siya void yung ginamit natin. Next, we're going to have function definition. So, kung balikan nato, guys, again, tapos na tayo kay function prototype. This time, we're going to proceed, or we're going to proceed now with the function definition. So, ano ba yung function definition? Sa function definition, when you write the source code for a certain function, that block of code lines is what you call function definition. A function definition contains two parts. May dalawa siyang parts, guys. So, either so-called header and body, or function header and function body. So, a function header, it is exactly the same with the function prototype, except that the semicolon. So, meron siyang semicolon. So, ang sa prototype kasi may semicolon. Pero dito po sa tinatawag natin na function definition, ang part nito is sa function header, wala na siya semicolon po. Ito po yung sabi ko kanina. Yung nakikita natin sa int main na function, meron siyang, wala siyang semicolon. Kaya ang tawag doon, definition na to siya. Okay, header yung tawag doon. A function body, guys, it is consist of a compound statement or a block of code that actually does the task the function was created for. So this is an example. Ito po yung siya, gikuan ako siya, butangan ako siya dari o kanang label. So general format of function definition. Generally, katong sa int main na to, yung na-mention ko nga kanina, this is what we call function header. Okay? Yung sinabi kong function prototype, meron siyang semicolon. Okay? Kailangan pa niyo maglagay diri sa taas. In main, open and close parentheses, and semicolon. So that is a function prototype. Yes, prototype. Ito yung kung ano niya definition. So sa definition, guys, meron siyang header and meron siyang body. Sir, asa ba dira ma-identify na mo kung asa nagsugod ang body o asa siya nag-end? So again, with the use of the curly brace. So ito yung start ng ating function int main, and ito yung end. Do you still follow?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So let's proceed now with the return statement. So ito na. A function, guys, returns when it a function returns when it encounters the closing brackets or when it executes the return statement. So ito siya. So once again, ma-encounter na niya sa return, iyan na siyang ibalik. So, wala na siya yung ipaas na value. So, dito po na sample. So, this is the function definition. This is the function header. And this is the function body. So, meron tayong 3 lines inside the function body. We initialize that the value of sum is equivalent to 0 with the data type of int. So, this is initialization. And this is what we call assignment. You assign value from your left to your right. Tama ba ko? So, ang calculation na
yes, sir.
So, m times n will be assigned to the variable sum. And you're going to return, since again, integer yung ating return type, it simply means na mag-return sa value. Kaya you can use return na keyword and the variable name na gusto nimo i-return. So you can have sample as the return value, which is actually integer po yung data type. So the return statement, to return or not to return. So ito yung no? Familiar ba yung tagline ng mga common yung Shakespeare or other na mga movie. So common ito. So this is actually the question na always ninyo siya timanan when you build a function or mag-construct function. A function, again, always remember that a function may or may not return a specific value of a specific data type. For example, ginamit nyo na ang data type, return type kay void, so expected na talaga yan na dili na siya mag-return to value. So, in short, kung void inyong gigamit na function, you can use printf kasi dili na siya mag-return og value. So, in short, pwede ka mag-display na lang ka dito og value. Okay? So, that's the use of printf. You can use printf inside your function. You can use scanf. You can use loop, if else, and switches, and any of the statement po. Pwede nyo siya gamitin inside your function. Third reason or third example of return type, if a function returns a value, the function must have a return. Ito siya, return data type that matches the data type of the return value. So it is very important, ito din po yung pinaka-importante when you talk about return type, na for example, ang inyong return type, ang inyong return type kay integer, pero ang imong ibutang dira na dito sa sample, diri, integer, unya ang gi-declare nimo diri kay sum kay float, unya gi-return mo si sum diri mag-error na siya guys. Why? Kasi mismatching po ang nangyari. Kasi nga float yung sum mo dito pero ang imuhang return type diri kay int, unya ibutang nimo diri sa return kay sum. Again, always remember kailangan mag-match po si return type o ang data type diri nga mo nakalagay kay return. For example, ang return type natin kay int, in short, the data type of sum must be int. Hindi pwede ng return type sa itong function kay int, kunya ang data type ni sum kay float. Hindi siya pwede. Mismatching po yung nangyari. So mag-error. Possible error. Ang in short, possible error na kay logical error. So yung problema talaga nasa kay programmer. Kasi logically, tama naman yung sa pero logically si programmer yung may mali. Kasi logically hindi naisip ni programmer na hindi nagka-match yung return type at yung data type ng kanyang i-declare. So, return type, if the function does not return any value, then the function must have void as return type, which means that it does not return anything in specific. But again, yung sinabi ko nga kanina, if you're going to use void, ang pinakanindot na gamiton inside your kuan kung gusto nyo ka maay ma-display or makuan sa ma-return sa. Since again, return is not dili na siya pwede ka magamit ng return na keyword, you can use printf po. Okay? So, ito yung sample. So, dito po yung, ito po yung kuan. So, spot the difference, guys. Ito po int, and ito po sa kabila void. Anyone from the class are going to discuss or spot the difference? This will serve as
Sir, ako, sir.
Yes, Mr.
Ay points?
Ano yung point?
Sir, kanina last nga line before sa bracket, kanina return sum, and then diri sa PCAS, see out. So, sa akong pagkasabot ani sir, pag i-call na nimo ang function, na siya answer daan, or compare nimo ani is kinahanglan pa ka mag-see out. Okay, nag-void man ka diri.
Correct. So, ang sa void, guys, since again, wala sa return type, ito sa, so you can display the results po. Okay? So, yun nga, you have to, dito po, you can, both, wala sa wala sa diri, so, diri, you can have two parameters dito na sample. Dito pa hindi niya siya void na wrong na niya siya. May int, p, and q pala ito. Sorry, na mali ni siya. Na mali na sa input. Sorry, kadali ka. Ano void na nakalaga? Hindi kasi yun void. Int, p, and int, q po ito. So, sandali. Tugo na siguro kapag pag-reconstruct sa so, yung kanina void, mali yun ha. So, int p and q. Dito po, the same lang po siya ng parameter. Ang difference lang is yung dito, hindi siya pwede dito mag-see out. Why? Kasi may return siya. Dito po, hindi siya pwede mag-return kasi nga void yung ating function. So, dapat, you can, the alternative or option that you can use para gusto niyo mo ma-display si sum is you're going to use the keyword cout. Thank you, Mr. Billones.
Thank you, sir.
Next will be, we're going to proceed na, hindi pa tayo tapos ha, we're going to proceed na with function call. Kanina, nakuha pa nato kung ano yung prototype, ano yung definition, ano yung function call. So, tapos na tayo sa dalawa. This time, we're going to have, or the last one po, na requirements when you build function, which is actually function call. So, after everything is set, na-set na nato yung definition, the header, the body, and the prototype. This time, I'm going to use na the function. So that's the use of function call. Using a function requires that you call it. So kailangan tawagon natin siya. Kasi pag mo siyang i-build si function, so niya, wala na mo siyang i-call, so magiging useful yung, useless yung ating function kasi hindi natin ginamit. Okay? Parang nahimo siyang flower dito sa tuang source code. So a function call consists of, so ito ha, please don't get confused with the argument and parameter. So kanina, na-discuss na natin si parameter and later po we're going to discuss argument. Okay. Now, a function call consists of two parts, function name and argument. So, ang function name, guys, this is the name of, ito po yung name ng function na gibutang nato, gibuhat nato during the katong sa ni, which is actually found katong sa header, function header, or sa atong prototype nato sa function. A function name, again, is given during the function prototype and definition. The second part of function call is what we call argument. These are the actual values that the function will be using the execution. So,
Dapat i-part 2 guys, thank you for watching guys.